Hello and welcome to Cricket8 Podcast. We are back with a new opener. And Rob, how excited are you? Not about the opener, but how things are stacked at the moment. Group 2, it is still obviously things are pretty clear there, rather. Group 1, it's all unclear and it's all chaotic and it's also exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. The longer Afghanistan stay in this competition, the more fun it is for everybody, in my opinion. It's a big shame that the West Indies have gone, RIP, but they'll be back, and I think this tournament will do the islands a lot of good moving forward. So yeah, I'm disappointed that the West Indies are out, but we're getting right to the business end now, so we're in for a big week ahead.
With zero
How are
in
you
on
feeling
West
about India's
Indies.
chances now, Megha?
I'm slightly nervous, but before that, I do want India to knock out Australia because no matter what we say, 19th November, we're never going to forget that. Although, if India does manage to knock out Australia, those memories, we might just look back at 19th November with a little less bitterness. And if India goes on to win this World Cup, then maybe that bitterness might just be done. But coming back to the West Indies now. Uh, 2023 ODI World Cup didn't even qualify. Before that as well, in the T20 version, 2016 won it, and before that, they were fairly fine. But subsequently, it all went downslide for them. Now being the host, being unbeaten in the group stage, and then stepping up in the group stage really. Before that as well, defeating India, defeating England, having rather defeating India, and then having a good series against England. Now coming into the World Cup, there were some expectations building around them. What went wrong in the Super 8?
Um, it kind of got to the stage where lose a big game, goodbye, and to give a very specific answer, they didn't score enough runs last night or this morning, wherever you are. They were 20 short, and the whole game was down to Andre getting run out. That was the pivotal moment of that game. He was just looking to get into his work. I think he hit Norkir for 6-6, and you think right, and he really wanted the strike for those last 3 overs. And he's not the Andre Russell now that can run the 100 metres in 10.9, which is what he used to be. And his knees just didn't quite let him get to the other end. And that was that. And they scored 135, where 155 probably would have been enough. Um, Kyle Mayer's opening is something that I love to see, but he couldn't really get going today. Pooran didn't stick around. But the big question for me is, how do they find a way of getting players like Narayan in the team? I
Hmm.
know he's officially retired, but that's basically because they told him he wasn't fit enough before when he clearly was fit enough to. I mean, look how he performed in the IPL this year. Absolutely smoking it with the bat and probably the best spinner in the whole competition. Like they could have really done with him in this World Cup. Any T20 team that's got Narayan in is better. Um, and where's Hetmeyer? I know they don't know where to use
Hmm.
him, but I don't think you need Powell and Rutherford. I think you probably need one of those two guys, and it's kind of got to be Powell if he's your captain. He didn't really perform. Um, I think they answered a few of the questions, but there's still plenty that remain unanswered. So find a way of getting those guys in. They're one pacer short of a good attack because they don't have any death
Yeah.
bowling anymore. Obed doesn't appear to have come back from injury as the same bowler that he was 2 years ago. So they're not a complete team by any stretch of the imagination, but they've still got the six hitting guns, and they've got Moti is a big plus for them, I think. It's a shame they're gone, but they didn't deserve to go through, if we're being honest.
Hmm.
So bad luck, and hopefully the Windies will come again.
Interesting that you talked about them being 20 runs short because you could say that about that England game as well, where at St. Lucia they couldn't really manage more than excess of 200. They only scored 181, and England chased that pretty
Yeah,
comfortably. So that game, and how would you reflect on that? Those two losses, obviously, eventually consequenting in what we are seeing today.
yeah, and I think in a tournament like this, anybody can lose to England and anybody can lose to South Africa, but in a tournament like this, you're not allowed to lose to both, and
Yeah.
that's what happened. And they left 20 runs out there against England. I thought 200 would have been really competitive, and 180 with the attack that this West Indies have got. Uh, wasn't quite defendable. As soon as England got into their stride and went, right, okay, we're T20 chasing now, everything feels good. Salt's getting formed together, Butler's getting formed together. All of a sudden, Livingston can play cricket again, as he proved it, the other day. 180 on a decent pitch is not enough against England. Um, Last night was different. It's If you've got this bowling attack for the West Indies, you can't score par. You need to score above par if you're going to defend anything. And I don't think that they wanted to chase in either of those games and ended up chasing in both. So that's unfortunate. I'm disappointed, but I am not massively surprised at what happened. But yeah, for me, it's very fine margins, these World Cups, these T20 World Cups. And it could be as simple as if Russell stays in for 3 more overs, they win the match and they're through. And then who knows what can happen. They're at home. They've got the fan base. I mean, how good was star of the West Indies this tournament was David Rudder, the guy singing the national anthem every game. Absolutely awesome. So they've done a lot for cricket in the West Indies, which definitely needed a boost, but probably not quite enough. They needed to get to the semis for me, really.
I wouldn't allow you to move on so quickly. I'd continue harping on the points that you made about the West Indies team. Now, Sunil Narine officially retired from international cricket, but spin attack that the West Indies came into this competition with did boast of names that had performed well in the build up to the tournament and did well in this tournament as well, be it Akil Hussain, be it Moti, or for that matter, Chase in the previous game. He was absolutely on money. So, what were you looking at Narayan as? Was it an all rounder in batting? What position you would have assigned him, or purely as a bowler?
Well, how can you say he's purely a bowler after scoring 400 odd
Yeah.
runs in the IPL? I still don't know where that came from. I watched all those games, and it's still a total mystery to me how it happened. But he scored his first ever 100. He's clearly in the batting form of his life, but actually, he's in the bowling form of his life in that tournament. Like nobody could get him away. No one could score runs off Narayan. And when you're watching Roston Chase be very good, which he was a couple of games ago, um, what was it? Three overs, 1 for 19 against England. Roston
Yeah.
Chase, and he is at best slightly more than part time with his bowling. But these pitches, these conditions, home and in America for the West Indies, absolutely perfect for Narayan. If you could pick a world 11 to play on these pitches, Narayan's probably the first name on the team sheet. He's that good. And if Roston Chase is going at a runner ball, what's Sunil Narayan going for? 3 and over? It's probably not 5 and over. And then
Hmm.
you add Motti's all-round skills to that. Akil is very good at drying up runs in the power play. He's not an out-and-out wicket threat. But Narayan proved again this IPL that if you try and take risks against him, he gets you out. And that's such a
Yeah.
massive skill to have. Whereas Akil, and Akil didn't bowl very well against South Africa. They went after him a bit. And when somebody goes after Narayan, he usually gets them. And when somebody goes after Akil, he's not at that level yet. I love Akil. He's a very good cricketer, but he's a guy that ideally you do a couple of overs in the power play and hope that they don't go after him and he sneaks through,
Hmm.
none for 10 off his 2 and he bowls one in the middle. But he's not Narayan. And Moti is very good, but he's not Narayan. And Roston Chase is nowhere near that level. So if those guys are performing, it's not, for me, it's not like, well, the spin was fine. It wasn't that lost them that got them knocked
Yeah.
out. The spin would have been way better if they had Narayan alongside those guys, and they could have fit him in the team because of his batting. Um, Charles is a guy at the top of the order who is very hit and miss, and he's a guy that can his criticisms are dot ball percentage is way too high. The West Indies blueprint is lots of dots, lots of sixes, basically.
Yeah.
Um, And when you can chuck Narayan as a guy that you can go, right, we need you to just try and whack the spin for 3 overs in the middle, or we need you to come
Hmm.
in at the top of the order and try and bang the power play. He gives you loads of options. He makes your batting order longer and he makes your bowling attack better. So, yes, he retired, but nobody's going to convince me that he retired because he wasn't already pissed off with what the West Indies had done to him previously.
Hmm.
But yeah, they could have done better if they managed to get their best team on the park.
So, are you disappointed or were you expecting this? And the reason I ask this is Unlike the previous campaigns, this time around, you'd hear them in the press conference and they'd be talking about how they're looking at lifting the title at home, giving it back to their fans. So, this conversation, a lot of teams are very reluctant or hesitant to do that at the group stage, at the Super 8 stage, or for that matter, even before the finals. But West Indies were pretty upfront about it.
Yeah, and so they should be really with their pedigree. If you look back when they won it for the first time, they had the stars there, but perhaps the world wasn't quite aware of how big a stars those guys were going to be all the way through the order. And then with Sammy holding everything together, and then they came back and did it again. And on both of those occasions, nothing was expected of the West Indies. You know, Marlon Samuels being man of the match in the World Cup final, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they had Gale, Russell, Narine, Bravo, um, Badri doing the Akil job, but better, if you know what I mean. If you look down this team, who were like, I tend to bring everything back to betting odds, but when they won it for the first time, they were 16-1 to win the World Cup. And this time, the West Indies were half that. So West Indies were meant to be twice as likely to win this one as that first one that they won. And if you look down the team, you go, well, is Brandon King and Johnson Charles the answer? Like, probably
Mm.
not, compared to look at India, look at India's openers, look at England's openers, look at Australia's. You would have to say that they're all stronger than those two guys. And then you do have stars. Pooran is undoubtedly a star. Russell, but Russell is definitely on the downslope of his career. He's still pulling stuff out the bag. But then you go, where's my gun pacer? Where's the guy that's going to get me wickets with the ball? And 3 or 4 years ago, I said, well, you've got all these guys coming through. Look at Obed, look at O'Shane, Thomas. The cupboard's pretty full, and the West Indies pace bowling can come back. But it used to be Bravo just got the wickets at the end and put a lid on those scores.
Yeah.
And they don't have anyone that does that anymore. They look really leaky at the death, West Indies, and you can't go. I mean, when England were slightly faltering in that chase the other day, Romario gets the ball, and that's the end of that. Game
Yeah.
over, finished.
Yeah.
30 off the over, done.
15th over? Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, why am I seeing Romario Shepherd on my screen here? Why is this guy bowling? Because Salt just went, oh right, I've been knocking it around for a while. Now I can just win the game.
Yeah.
And one thing England have got now is the devastating ability to pick their moment and go right whack,
Yeah.
and you're done. And Butler did that against USA. Spinner comes on Harmy and he goes, no, that's the game. The game's completely done now. 30 off the over. And West Indies don't have that scariness about them that they used to have, where it's like, well, Gale's going to get you at the top of the order.
Yeah.
And we've still got Andre, we've got Darren Sammy, there's Bravo himself, loads of guys that can do that whacking it at the end job. And now it's like, is it going to be Rutherford? Like, Rutherford played really well this World Cup. You know, he got runs. He got runs against England. He got 28, I think, and he did a big score the game before. But does he scare you like peak Andre Russell does, or some of the finishes that are knocking around now? They didn't feel like they had it for me, the West Indies. I didn't fancy them much before the tournament. I really hope they get to the semis, but South Africa have overperformed and the West Indies slightly underperformed, and that's why the last four is the last four, basically.
So you have your last four already logged in. I'd obviously take out more from you on that. But last question on the West Indies team, and I promise it would be the last. Now, 2 years down the line, there'd be another T20 World Cup. There'd be new stars emerging who'd get a look in, highly likely. But from this squad of 15, who do you look forward to?
Great question. The West Indies need to give Kyle Mayers more responsibility because he has a very high ceiling. Like he's proved that he can do it in all formats. Kyle Mayers. He played the best Test innings I think I've ever seen on debut. Maybe not the best I've ever seen. It wasn't quite as good as Pereira's against South Africa, but it was really good. It was a double away at Bangladesh on a turning pitch. So he can do it in Test matches. He can do it in T20s. He can bowl. He's a gun fielder. He can smack it at the top, but he doesn't really get the chances. And you think, well, why is he behind these guys that like Johnson Charles? He was there when they won it. He was in that squad
Yeah.
13 years ago, or whatever it was. It is time to give. I mean, Mayers is by no means some great new young hope. He's 31. Um, they need to give Mayers more and bring the young guys through under him because he's got magic car Mayers. I'm telling you. I don't think Shy Hope's the answer. I think Nicky P has to do a lot of the heavy lifting here with bringing the younger guys through because Pooran's been there since he was a teenager doing stuff for Trinidad with the old guard, with Pollard and Russell and those guys. Akil is a guy everybody loves. Akil's got to step up and start scoring some runs now because he's everyone goes on about how good he is with the bat. When was the
Hmm.
last time he did anything with the bat? Maybe chuck him up the order sometime, see if he can smash a few spinners about or something. Motti very good, and then Joseph needs to step up because he's basically the leader now. He should be coming into his prime. He's 27. He should be coming into his prime right now and saying, okay, I'm looking around and I can't see that many pacers that are going to lead this attack. I'll do it. So these guys need to take responsibility, and the talent will emerge from the West Indies because it always does. And then the board, and it's a very difficult job for the board because you've got to keep lots of different islands happy, haven't you? You've got to keep
Yeah.
Jamaica and Trinidad and Guyana and Barbados and everybody. And then you've got St. Lucia and all the others. You've got to keep everybody happy, and they've all got their own views of who should play. But the talent must be given a chance for the West Indies, and you can't keep not picking players for weird reasons. You've got to find a way to keep people happy, and it's a bit like Sri Lanka sometimes. Like they fall out with the board a lot, and people aren't getting paid,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of nonsense behind the scenes with the West Indies, which needs to disappear. And this is a boring cliche, but cricket is always better when the West Indies are competing properly, and they haven't competed in Test matches for a while. There's been some very bright moments when they beat the Aussies recently. That was amazing. Um, we just want to see talent like that coming through and staying there and being kept together. But there's a lot of questions still to be answered by the West Indies. But it can't just be we're going to play cricket and hope that Andre bails us out because
Hmm.
he's not going to be here in, well,
Forever, yeah.
probably 3 or 4 years' time. Any
Interesting.
more Windies?
Meanwhile, finally, moving on, there's a question around MLC, but Cowboys, you'd have to provide us the context for that. He's very excited for the MLC, but his reasons for the excitement, what is the context? You'd have to let us know. We'd get back to that later. Now, South Africa. When you talked about them, you mentioned that they've probably overachieved. The matches have been very close. Now, this is very unlike South Africa, but obviously, today's was a clutch game. Today's game, uh, it had a lot riding on it. It would have decided who went to the semis uh, in the second or the first spot, depending on whoever won. South Africa did well today, crossed the line. Before that, as well, from the start of the campaign, this time around against Sri Lanka. Against Sri Lanka, probably after having bundled them out for under 80, it was probably South Africa's game to lose, and they almost lost it before eventually winning it. Against Nepal as well, showed those nerves. So, be it while chasing, be it while defending the targets, they've shown nerves. I mean, what does that tell you about what is to follow from here on in the semis, or if they make it to the finals in the finals?
Yeah. Sorry, South Africa fans, but they're not going to win this World Cup. Uh, so one way of looking at it is they've had loads of close games and they've come out on top in all of them. But we all know that they can't win knockout matches. Last night will give them great hope because it did get a bit close
Almost. Yeah.
and it kind of was a knockout game, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
they came through, but they made a meal of it again when they didn't have to. With 2 overs to go, you were thinking, oh, here we go again. They're going to muck it up. And Rabada actually played a great shot. And Rabada has a great shot in him, but if you're relying on him to see you over the line with the bat, none of them took responsibility last night. Stubbs played a stupid shot. Markram played a stupid shot. And you think, okay, the old South Africa chokey's creeping back in again. They made a meal of it against Sri Lanka when they were chasing 70 odd. They made a mega meal of it against Nepal, similar type
Yeah.
of score. Excuse me. And they needed a great innings from Miller that day to bail them out. Uh, Bangladesh, somehow they defended 113, was it?
18 runs win. Yeah.
Um, so they're I mean, Nepal definitely should have chased the 115, but they found a way to win the games. And these tournaments are about finding ways to win cricket matches when you're up against it. But they're going to have to do it twice now against teams that are probably better than them. Um, I mean, I still have great hope that Afghanistan get through. Uh, th- they can cause South Africa trouble, but on paper, they're going to have to win 2 games against teams that are better than them. And there will be times where these guys have got to step up and really appear in. And if Nortje defending 12, do you fancy him? Like, I definitely don't. Who are they going to give the ball to? Like, do they have to save Rabada now, who seems to have
Yeah.
been bowling better at the death? I just can't see it myself. I think, yes, it's great that they're unbeaten in this, but I think it would be the most South African tournament ever is if they were the only ones that were completely unbeaten all the way through to the final, and then they just blow up when they need 9 off the last over or something, or they can't defend 15. Yeah, South Africa have done great, and any team with Klassen in is scary,
Yeah.
but they ain't going to win it. And there's 5 teams left as we're talking now, Megha, and South Africa aren't going to win. I'd say they're the
Hmm.
least likely winners for me, which
I
mathematically is
see.
wrong, but in my head, I can't see them winning it.
Interesting. We'd take a stock of that opinion after the World Cup comes to a close, or maybe when South Africa crash out, if they do crash out in the semis itself. But talking about their batting now, top order, the lamentation during the group stage was that they weren't contributing as much. And then Quinton de Kock stepped up 2 matches back to back. Today, similar story. Top order didn't really step up. There were contributions, cameos from the middle order, and then you needed Marco Jansen and Rabada to close the game for them. But then, all in all, looking at their batting order and how things look for you.
So Reza is somebody that played very well just before the tournament, and everybody was like, Hendricks is playing well now. But he's never really done it on the big stage. He's not. Again, you pick out some names from the other likely winners. You know, would you rather have Reza Hendricks or Travis Head or Virat Kohli or Rohit Sharma or Josh Butler? There's one of those that's a considerable level below the others. I think it's fair to
Hmm.
say. Um, De Kock is a guy that spends a lot of time on the T20 circuit and he's very experienced. But again, when does he kick on in T20s and win a game with
Yeah.
the 90 not out? Which every other one of those people that I've mentioned has done that, has scored the 100 and taken the game away. In big games, De Kock is an absolute gun in the 50 over game, as he proved in the World Cup just gone. And with him at the top and the middle order of Markram, Klassen, Miller, that's about as good as it gets, that middle order. And they still didn't do anything in the World Cup. That was the time where they really had a chance with the batting. So on paper, you go, well, they've got Markram, Klassen, Miller, and Stubbs had a great IPL and looked quite good yesterday, and you think the batting's fine, but you kind of drill down into it. They were chasing 135 yesterday on a kind of 160 pitch, and they made an absolute meal of it because nobody wanted to take responsibility. There was, as you said, Megha, cameos everywhere, pretty 20s that don't win you World Cups. You need someone to go, all right, lads, I'll do it. And yes, it was against Nepal, but Miller did that. He was like, okay, I'll have to chase these because none of you sods are doing anything to help me. Uh, at the end of the day, they might pull off 2 big chases or set scores that are too big as Klassen goes bananas twice. And
Hmm.
you're talking about picking world 11s. Klassen's definitely in everybody's world 11. If he
Yeah.
goes bananas for 2 games, they can win the World Cup. But the batting, I think it's fine on paper. I think Reese's the weak link. Um,
Hmm.
I think Stubbs is probably the most improved of anyone in the top sixes across this World Cup. He was way better than I thought he was during the IPL. He did some really good things for Delhi.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know whether it's kind of memories, it's kind of ingrained in my brain that South Africa can't do it when it really matters, having watched them in all these white ball comps down the years. Do you give them a chance, Megha? What do you reckon?
Well, the close matches have gotten me concerned as an Indian fan. You talked about a team that doesn't really close it out when it comes to important games, when it comes to do or die situations. Now, there's a team that has built its reputation around actually always managing to cross that finishing line in clutch games, and that's Australia. Australia versus India today, so much hinges on that. Australia have won the toss and have invited India to bat first. Now, we have a comment here, a query here. Parth asks, would you have dropped Stark due to pitch conditions or poor forms outside playoffs? Is that something that you would have considered a possibility?
No, because if you're going to drop anyone there, you drop Hazelwood, and you pick Ellis for Hazelwood is probably what I would do. I don't think. I think Hazelwood um, got away with doing the whole I'm going to put it line and length over and over again in T20s for quite a long time. But people are working that out now and going, well, actually, if the pitch isn't doing anything for you, we're just going to step and mow you through the covers or straight back over your head. The reason why I say I would keep Stark is because for anybody that was joining us on Cricket 8 throughout the IPL, I was bagging Stark all the way through because he got £2.2 million sterling to play in that competition, and he bowled like a drain in every single game for the first 10, 12 games. He was hopeless. He didn't look like a wicket threat. He was just bowling quite fast in the slot and watching it go past him at 12, 13 and over. He was absolutely rubbish. But as soon as they qualified for the business end, he turned into the old Mitchell Stark and he looked great. He helped them win the final. He helped them win the second eliminator or whatever it's called. And it looked like the old Stark was back. He was a real threat at the start, and he also looked like that guy that can just hoover the tail at the end and clean up the tail end as bowled or whatever. And I don't think you can drop a guy with that much pedigree because even though he's looked average again, maybe the pitches don't suit a bowler like him. He's got that experience of big game, and the Aussies are very good at this, of performing very well when it really matters. And Stark, say whatever you like about him, he's a guy that does that. So I would definitely want Stark around for me at the business end of this competition.
Hmm. Well, and so has Mitch Marsh because Stark is back in for Agar in this game, and we obviously update you further as we receive the updates. But talking about the Indian lineup, now the team sheet would be out anytime. But do you see Shivam Dubey making way for Yashasvi Jaiswal and Yashasvi Jaiswal slotting in at the top? Because if there's any time to do it, it's now. Shivam Dubey, you wouldn't use him as a bowler. India did try using him. It didn't go too well in India's favor. And in important games, highly unlikely that if other bowlers are taking a beating, Shivam Dubey would be handed the ball.
Yeah.
And apart from that, with his batting, there was this important knock in the previous game, 34 of 24 deliveries against Bangladesh on a slow track. But him having built this reputation of being a spin hitter, it hasn't been that lethal. He hasn't been that lethal against spinners. So sixes haven't been on display in their full glory. So do you see that happening?
Unfortunately, not, because I think they're completely set on Rohit and Virat at the top, and you try muscling your way in. Jaiswal didn't have a good enough IPL to make a case. If you'd have asked me a year ago, I'd have said you must pick Jaiswal at the top of the order, no questions, all day, every day. But he didn't do it in the IPL, and Virat did, to be fair. And Rohit's the captain, and you're not going to move either of those two. Dubey is an amazing spin hitter, but it's one thing hitting some of the absolute garbage that is thrown his way in the IPL, and it's quite another in the World Cup when you've got the best 6 or 7 spinners other than Narine in the world all playing against you every time. And so he hasn't been given the garbage that he can feast on. Yeah, he's not the best number 5 in this competition, Dubey. He had a really good first half of the IPL, and he was rubbish in the second half when pitches got a bit more
Yeah.
difficult.
Or once he got selected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that happened to a few of the Indian guys, didn't it? They found out they were in the team and put their feet up a bit. But I mean, if cricket had to be played wearing concrete boots, then Dubey would be the best of all time because he never moves. That applies to his fielding as well. He will be in the team today. I think he is. I'm just trying to look now.
Yeah.
He he wouldn't be in my India team. I would find a way to get Jaiswal in. Rinku would be in all day long ahead of Dubé for me. Rinku did nothing wrong. He just didn't get enough goes this year in the
Yeah.
IPL. But his India numbers are phenomenal. Rinku, how on earth has he not managed to get in the squad? So the conversation probably shouldn't be why isn't Jaiswal playing, and it should
Mm.
be where the hell is Rinku? Because if Rinku's
Mm.
playing instead of Dubé, you slide Hardik up one and have Rinku as your finisher. Because for me, that's the area where India are slightly behind some of the other teams. Is they don't have that guy who finishes, and they
Yeah.
had him, and they didn't bother taking him with them to the World Cup.
Mm.
So yeah, it's not why is Dubé playing in this squad. It's why the
Mm.
hell isn't Rinku in the squad for me.
Mm. So Akash is specifically directing this comment to you. He feels bad for Windies, but nonetheless, a good game, and he has that round of applause, I think, for the West Indies. Anyway, moving on to
Thanks,
the next
Akash.
comment. That's by I am Deva. Perfect setup for revenge, and obviously that will be the refrain in this competition, in this clash. But then would India be thinking so much about it? It's good for all other teams, all the remaining three teams that make it, because one, Afghanistan gets in if Australia crashes out, and the other teams as well. Whenever it's Australia and ICC tournaments and in knockout games, you do fear them. So all the teams would
Hmm.
thank India if India manages to convince Australia to pack its bag and leave.
Yeah, and the only thing I can't stop thinking about here is the 2019 50 over World Cup, which I think about a lot
Yeah.
as an Englishman. Uh, England had to beat India to stay in that competition, and India could have really done everyone else a favour by knocking England out that day, and India didn't show up. They didn't. It was Jadeja and
Yeah.
Dhoni, wasn't it, knocking the ball around in the chase?
Kedar Jadhav as well, yeah.
Jadav, that's right. And everybody was saying, why aren't they trying to chase these? Why don't they want to knock England out? What's happening here? And they, for whatever reason, they kind of had a bit of a net and thought, well, we'll just get ourselves into form for later on. We're not worried about you too much. Um, and my concern, as somebody who is staunchly anti-Australia, mainly because of Jared Kimber, is that Australia kind of get a bit of an easier ride against India than a lot of teams do. I'd be much more confident of India winning this if it was the semi-final than this game right now. I don't think India are going to be all that up for it, based on watching some of these guys kind of have a bit of a lie down against England a few years ago. Let's see what happens. I think both sides have weaknesses, and I think both sides have enormous strengths. I think Arshdeep against Travis Head is really, really important.
Mm.
He cleaned him up at the end of the IPL, didn't he?
Yeah.
Absolute perler that clean bowled him, and Head got clean bowled again the other day. He has a weakness early, Travis Head, but he is a massive game player. We're talking about Aussies being
Mm.
big game players. Man of the match in the World Cup semi-final, man of the match in the World Cup final, man of the match in the World Test
World
Championship
Test
final.
Championships, yes.
He's a gun. So that is an absolutely huge part of this game, is whether Travis Head can stick around and see off Arshdeep and Bumrah at the top. Anybody that can see Bumrah, I don't want to talk
Yeah.
about him too much because he's so good.
Mm.
Any team that's got hit, the reason why India are big favourites for this World Cup for me is Jasprit Bumrah. It's not because India are a great team or they're a brilliant T20 tactical masters. I think it's
Yeah.
because they've got the best player in the world by miles, and that's Jasprit. How do you
Mm.
see it going today? Any nerves, or are you just thinking,
Not
well, it doesn't
really.
matter?
It doesn't matter, although mathematically it does, but we would want India to show up at its best, and that's what probably I am Deva is protesting as well. No, I think India is going to definitely turn up today, and momentum is an important thing, and probably that's the reason why you'd want India to continue in the same vein that they performed thus far, and also the fact that all this while they were up against teams that were sick. There was a glaring gap between them and the team that they were competing against. Pakistan may be obviously a full member nation, but not the best Pakistani team to turn up on the day. Otherwise, the wins have come against the USA, the wins have come against Ireland, Afghanistan, Bangladesh. Afghanistan, of course, defeating Australia. But then you would want to perform well against a quality opponent when the stakes are at all time high for that opponent, and carry that confidence into the semi-finals and then go on to lift the trophy. I had to mention that. All good points, Rob, is what the comment says. And
Thanks, Mum.
anyway, talking about this clash now, Adam Zampa, what is it with him and World Cups? If you remember 2023 edition of the World Cup, he was struggling heading into the tournament, and once the tournament started, there was a different Adam Zampa that came up, and then he started performing in every game, and including that crucial final. Not much gets talked about his performance, but he too made a crucial contribution in the middle overs. And similarly, in the World Cups before that, be it the 2021 edition of the World Cup, when he finished as the second highest wicket taker, and again, he's been absolutely on money for Australia, and it's been on the same lines this time around as well. Now, Indian batters are pretty equipped to play against spinners, at least on paper. How do you see the matchup with the Indian batters shaping up for Adam Zampa today?
So I think they match up fine with Adam Zampa because they're way more experienced at playing high level spin than most of the other teams. However, Zampa is extremely consistent in these events, as you point out, and he does go under the radar a bit because he doesn't get blistering fifers. He doesn't get loads of stumpings and rag it past the edge all the time. He's just very consistent at getting 2 for 28. And if you've got a guy in your team that gets 2 for 28 a lot, your whole attack can work around that. You know that he's not going to get spanked. 19 times out of 20, he's not going to get spanked. He's not going to get taken apart in the middle overs. You don't need to change your plans. You just go, Zampa, do your thing, keep them down to 7 and over, and he will get wickets because he's one of those guys, a bit like Adil Rashid for England, that if you take liberties against him, he's going to get you out. He's going to get wickets. And he loves being attacked because he's been around a long time now. I remember when he first came on the scene for Stars about 12, 13 years ago. He's 32. I know he looks about 11 years old, but he's 32 now, Zampa. He knows how to play cricket. He's really experienced, and he's one where it's like, I'm happy to take my none for 20. If you're not going to attack me, I'll just do that. I'll bowl in the right place and everything will be fine. Or you can come after me and I'll get a couple of wickets. And
Mm,
he is integral to Australia's success in the last few years in the white ball
yeah.
game. Um, I don't think India are scared of him. I don't think he's a guy where it's like he's not Rashid Khan, is he? And he's not Narayan, but he's absolute top tier in this tournament. Um, you've got an attack like Sri Lanka's that have fallen by the wayside. And you look at their attack, you go, well, they're unbelievable. Hasaranga, Theekshana, um, Thashara, and Pathirana. That's unbelievable attack for these conditions. They didn't even make it through. And he's the only real spinner. I'm not calling Ashton Agar a spinner. He's the only real spinner Australia have got.
Yeah.
And in this competition, you think, how do you have an attack with one spinner? Because that's all Australia can do, really. Like Maxwell
Mm,
can give you an over here and there. And they just go, well, this is what we've got in Australia. We're not blessed with loads of spinners. We've got one guy who's just been really consistent. I don't think India are going to fear him, but if they take liberties against him, they'll lose their wickets. Somebody like um, the matchups that's intriguing here is Sky and Pant against Zampa because they
mm,
won't be able to help themselves. They'll definitely go after
yeah.
him. And it could be that they take him down. England have taken Zampa down once or twice. But it's more likely that if Sky comes out all guns blazing against Zampa, then Zampa will send one straight through him. And then
Mm.
there's a game.
Almost tempted to call Maxwell a proper spinner. By the way, I'm pretty sure that even Narayan's family and friends wouldn't be missing him as much as you do when he's away. In this case, he doesn't feature in the squad, didn't feature in the squad, and you're missing him so much. He features in every conversation of yours. But in the meanwhile, we'd also quickly take you through this comment. I'm Deva says, I think if India wins today, South Africa have a great chance winning the World Cup. They'll play against Afghans in the semis. Now, for teams that have not really been there, done that, how challenging would it be for them to carry on with that intensity? In this case, Afghanistan, if India managed to knock Australia out and Afghanistan gets into the semis, they showed intensity in that game against Australia. Before that, they were all right. Big loss against the West Indies. Before that, in the group stage as well, they were looking pretty good. Do you expect them to go all the way? Do you expect them to make it their 83 moment, like the way India turned it around in the 1983? Or would it be, again, it's not a fair comparison, but if you look at the way USA performed in this World Cup, they showed that intensity, that fire at the start, but in the group stage, they were really good. But as the game progressed, as the World Cup progressed, the performances started diminishing, and the last two losses were enormous, were huge, coming against
Mm.
the West Indies and then England. 10 wicket hammering against England, in fact, with over 10 overs to spare. So, do you think with teams that have not been there, not done that regularly, the intensity drops the longer the tournament runs?
So I think what happened to the USA is they got extremely up for it at the start, and they
Yeah.
were wonderful at the start of this tournament. The game against Canada was fantastic, and then obviously beating Pakistan was one of cricket's great joys. It really was. And they thoroughly deserved to beat Pakistan. They were the better team in all phases of that game. But what they did, and you can understand this from a USA's point of view, is they peaked right at the very start of the tournament because nobody expected them to go through to the Super 8. So why not have everybody completely up here for the group stage, right? Because no one thinks they're going to qualify. What you want to do in these tournaments, if you're going to win it, is peak at the right time and not burn yourself out after two games, because they had their final against Pakistan, the USA. And after that final was finished, they basically didn't turn up for this World Cup. That team that played against England yesterday,
Yeah.
it was like one of the old school, and I hate this word, one of the old school minnows playing, where they just got smashed and they lost their heads with the ball after that. After Butler crunched that first one through the covers, that was the end of the game. They gave up. But Afghanistan, maybe they're peaking at the right time here because they kind of did enough to get through.
Yeah.
Their team on paper is unbelievable for these conditions, for slow, spinny pitches. I would have their attack over Australia's on these pitches. And they used what? How many bowlers did they use the other day? Eight? Eight guys
Hmm.
bowled when they beat Australia.
Everybody could
Eight.
bowl.
And they go, and yes, Karote, he's not the answer, but they found that out already. They found that out before they've got basically three knockout games. Gulda bin Naib turns up and somehow bowls three for nothing, 3 for 20 was it of his 4 overs. Faruqi is the top wicket taker in this World Cup. He's got it on a string at the start. Um,
Yeah.
Naveen Ulhak's coming back. Noor played the other day. They've got Rashid Khan. Nabi's still knocking around. And when you've got guys with magic in them with the bat, like Omarzai, like Gurbaz and Zadran, and scary guys that can come in and hit sixes from anywhere, you've
Hmm.
got to get Rashid Khan out to stop Afghanistan scoring a big one. There's
Yeah.
there's like just loads of them can do stuff, Afghanistan. And when you've got one of
Hmm.
those games where the pitch is playing tricks a bit, it's staying a bit low, they're fighters, aren't they, Afghanistan? And when the pressure's on, these guys now are very experienced. They've got they're all on the circuit. There's loads of teams that have got an Afghanistani player in them.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't expect them to go all the way, but I've been backing them with my own money all the way through this tournament, and they're 22-1 to win the World Cup now, and I'm still backing them now. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, let's hope India do an absolute job on Australia. Afghanistan muck about and somehow see off Bangladesh, and then who knows?
Yeah. Well, a quick comment here. Should USA's performance in Super 8 make Pakistan feel more depressed because they've looked like a total minnow? No offense. You've already caused offense with the disclaimer, no offense. And there's another quick query or rather comment. I'm Deva says, but they did get smashed against India. Their batting, barring the openers, is so bad. Rashid is literally the third best batsman, I feel, which is actually very true in Afghanistan's case. Top order has performed and did well in the group stage as well, but the middle order isn't really stepping up.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but it hasn't had to. Like, they've done absolutely enough so far. And if you'd have told Afghanistan that the table would look like this and they'd be in this position on the last day of the Super Eights, they'd snap your hand off.
Yeah.
And when you go, yeah, I don't think Janat is necessarily the answer. But when you've got Omazai and Rashid Khan and Gulbadin and Nabi still, you've got plenty of guys that can just do that 30 off 11 that kills a game. And that's really important in these conditions, that you've got guys that can take it away. And they've got 4 or 5 of those guys with magic in them. And most of them have been around the block a long time now. And I think there were signs in that Australia game where they were so up for it and they assessed conditions really well. They actually played smart. They were 40 for none off the power play, which is a good effort in those conditions. But both of those guys curbed their natural instincts and they went, yeah, the middle order guys aren't going to do this for us today. We're the
Yeah.
set guys. We're going to take the responsibility here. And they batted for 15 overs, those two. And sure, then you can go, right, Nabi got 10 off 4 or something, and people can just add a few runs at the end. But they got 150-ish, and they knew at half-time that 150 was enough, and they came out and bowled. And they don't just have spin now. You've got Faruqi swinging it round corners
Yeah.
at the top, and Naveen is a very, very good spinner a very, very good pacer who has loads of experience now on the T20 circuit. I think everybody has written Afghanistan off, and I hope they do it. I'd rather see them win than anyone else, I think.
And for that, of course, Australia would have to crash out. Now, our expectations from this game: India batting first. We've seen cameos from the top of the order. It happened the previous game, and that has probably been the refrain in this tournament. We've not seen one batter batting through, and probably that didn't work for India in the previous editions of this tournament. So they'd be wanting to maintain that tempo. We've seen how important the power play overs have been, and that's why in the previous game, Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, they went for their shots. Hardik Pandya stepping up with both the bat and the ball has been extremely important for India, and they'd want that to continue. But apart from the ones mentioned, who do you think would be the key players? Jasprit Bumrah goes without saying, you'd have to name other names.
Kuldeep, Kuldeep on these pitches. He has this ability to keep the ball very low, and when the pitch, because of his trajectory, and when the pitch is staying low anyway, as some of these decks are, he becomes a huge threat, LBW and bowled, of just skidding underneath the bat. So Kuldeep is a huge factor for India. I think so. You can go on about players like Sky. We all know what Sky can do. But he's because he puts such a low price on his own wicket, someone like Butler doesn't do that. But if conditions are tough against Butler, he just drops anchor for a bit and goes, okay, like what Chris Gale used to do. When
Yeah.
Dale Steyn came on against Chris Gale, he just blocked it or left it because he was a great test match player. Now, Sky isn't that. He just goes, well, okay, conditions are tough, so I'm going to try and whack it even further. Let's do that way. And that's why he's got 50-50, 5-10-5 or whatever it is in this World Cup. So he is somebody that, yes, he's as good a ball striker as anybody, but you could say the same thing about Glenn Maxwell.
Yeah.
Pant can do that kind of stuff as well. But those are the guys that they might win you a game out of nothing. Maxwell does it 1 in 10 or something. We all remember the ones when he does do it.
Yeah.
But it's the guys like Kuldeep who can be very dangerous on these type of pitches. Aksar's a great cricketer. I love Aksar. He can
Yeah.
keep the runs down. He just does his job very quietly, not particularly exciting. He can chip in with a few runs here and there. He can bat. When you're under it, he can dig you out of trouble with the bat
Yeah.
and get that 20 off 20, which is sometimes really important on these pitches. He can whack it at the end if he's needed to, and he's dependable is what he is. And just go, right, I talked about Afghanistan there. None of those guys are dependable. You can't rely on them for anything. They're all lunatics. But India's way is we go, right, Jadeja and Aksar, they're playing all 3 today, aren't they? Jadeja and Aksar are just going to try and dry the runs up and let Kuldeep attack. And if Kuldeep has the license to attack, he's a very, very good spinner, very good wicket-taking option. So that, I think, is too easy to say Bumrah. You could answer almost any cricket question, Bumrah. It's like, what time is it today, Bumrah? It basically is. Like, he's so much better than everybody else. It's a joke. which allows the other guys to play with a bit more aggression and try a few things because they know Bumrah's only going at 4 and over at the other end. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why India are overwhelming favourites for this tournament, is because Bumrah's so good. But yeah, I think Kuldeep is a guy to look out for today.
Thank God Naren got replaced by Bumrah in constantly featuring in your answers. But Glenn Maxwell, unfortunately, is back in form for all the good that Afghanistan have done to this tournament. They've also brought back Maxwell to form, like they did in the 2023 edition of the tournament, when Maxwell, on one foot, on one leg, managed to score a double century and win his team that game against Afghanistan. But all in all, it sets it up really nicely for this clash. India and Australia, do or die for Australia, and all the other teams would really want it to end for Australia right here, because when they make it further, they get a really tough nut, turn into really tough nuts. Meanwhile, thank you so much, Rob. It's been a pretty long discussion, but because the questions were coming in, so we were tempted to continue with it. We'll see you again. Until then, goodbye and take care.
See you guys. Thanks, Megha.